Michoacán, honestidad y trabajo.
Hola, ¿cómo están? Buenos días. Vamos a continuar este día de capacitación con el webinar que tenemos el día de hoy de los 3 mayores errores que limitan la rentabilidad de tu empresa y cómo evitarlos. En esta ocasión tenemos de manera remota a Javier Argüello como representante de Fitocorp, quien les hablará y quien presentará los temas del doctor Alan Barnard, quien es un científico con doctorado en tecnología gerencial e innovación. Él también es economista, psicólogo e ingeniero. Él es experto a nivel mundial en generación de utilidades, rendimiento organizacional y teoría de las restricciones. Javier, buenos días, ¿cómo estás? ¿Sí nos escucha por ahí, Javier?
Sí, hola, sí se escucha, correcto. Morelia, un placer, muchas gracias el poder compartir y estar con ustedes y poder ser parte de esa transmisión y esa oportunidad para todos los empresarios de Michoacán, para todas las empresas. Pues va a ser algo muy bonito, una oportunidad bastante única por lo que significa contar con, en este caso, de manera pregrabada, pero contar con los conocimientos y con toda la experiencia y los datos que nos va a brindar el doctor Alan Barnard, que como lo has mencionado, es un científico con una trayectoria enorme, inmensa, vasta experiencia con diferentes empresas de toda índole, empresas grandes, monstruosas, y a la vez empresas pequeñas, medianas, familiares. Entonces, todo ese cúmulo de experiencia va a venir a beneficiar a todos los participantes. Eso es lo que esperamos.
Muchísimas gracias, Javier. Agradecemos a ustedes por esta gran intención de compartir este webinar con el gobierno del estado de Michoacán y con toda la ciudadanía de este estado. Muchísimas gracias, te dejamos el uso de la voz y bueno, a nombre de Academich y de la Secretaría de Desarrollo Económico del estado de Michoacán, les damos la más cordial bienvenida.
Con todo gusto y muchas gracias igualmente a ustedes. Pues sí, como les comentaba anteriormente, pues tener esa oportunidad de contar con el doctor Barnard es un beneficio muy grande. Desafortunadamente, si podemos decirlo así de alguna manera, por los tiempos y por lo ocupado que se encuentra el doctor Barnard, no le es posible atender en vivo. Eso sería posteriormente, nosotros tendríamos ya, eso es algo diferente en dado caso que alguien más quiera saber, pero tendríamos un evento en vivo con el doctor Barnard, pero nosotros tenemos esta conferencia pregrabada que el objetivo sería precisamente compartir muchísimos conocimientos. Y hablando de compartir conocimientos, quiero darles un ejemplo de lo que hizo el doctor Barnard con un empresario, concretamente con el presidente de una editorial de libros en Estados Unidos, una de las editoriales más grandes y más prestigiosas de libros. Pues sucede de que se lo presentan en una reunión social informal y en 5 minutos que tienen de plática hay un intercambio de conocimientos impresionante. Con eso lo que quiero transmitir es el grado de consejo y el grado de enfoque de cómo el doctor Alan Barnard puede ayudarles a sus empresas, ¿no? Y en sus diferentes gestiones. Pues resulta, volviendo al ejemplo que les comentaba, que este presidente de esta editorial de libros le comenta a Alan y le pregunta: Alan, dado el caso de lo que me han hablado de ti, de tu persona, con toda tu trayectoria y experiencia, te quiero comentar y brindar 2 o 3 datos. Uno es que a mí me han elegido presidente y director ejecutivo de esa empresa porque yo les he prometido que vamos a duplicar las utilidades netas de la empresa en un determinado tiempo. Actualmente nosotros estamos generando 1.500 millones de dólares al año. Nuestras utilidades netas son de 150 millones. Prácticamente el consejo directivo me ha electo porque yo hice esta promesa que en determinado tiempo, en corto tiempo, iba a duplicar las utilidades. Sin embargo, no contaba o actualmente nos está amenazando fuertemente Amazon porque está incursionando al mercado con los libros digitales. ¿Qué puedo hacer? ¿Qué me recomiendas? ¿Consideras? Hemos estado pensando en realizar algunos despidos, etcétera. Y en ese momento, Alan le hace 2 preguntas y le da su sugerencia que lo dejan estupefacto y perplejo al director, al presidente de esta empresa editorial. Una de ellas es que le pregunta qué tanto les afectaría a sus clientes que en el precio promedio de libros que ustedes venden incrementen un 10%. O sea, que si un libro se vende en $20, que pase a venderse a $22, un incremento de un 10%. Y le responde el presidente de esa empresa y le dije, pues no tendría mucho impacto, no afectaría mucho. Pienso que lo podríamos realizar sin ningún problema. Y le dice a Alan, pues ahí está la solución. Con el hecho que ustedes incrementen un 10% en el precio promedio de venta de estos productos, automáticamente les va a generar el hecho que les va a generar y a dar la posibilidad de que ustedes puedan duplicar las utilidades. O sea, de los 1.500 millones de ventas, van a poder duplicar las utilidades que estaban en 150 millones a 300 millones de dólares. Y este señor se queda perplejo y le pide que le haga un dibujo, un pequeño diseño mental de cómo es que realizó eso y cómo es que funcionaría eso, porque pues no había pensado en esta solución que le estaba brindando Alan. Y sobre todo que le menciona lo primero y la inclinación de cualquier empresa sería tratar de duplicar las ventas. Para poder duplicar las ventas, con el hecho de duplicar las ventas, que se puedan duplicar las utilidades, pero eso es demasiado riesgoso. Tendrían que aumentar el portafolio de libros, de nuevos libros, incrementar nuevos canales de distribución y son medidas sumamente riesgosas que requieren mucha inversión y de la otra manera se pueden economizar muchísimo, muchísimo dinero. De eso es precisamente lo que trata el siguiente ejemplo y es el video que Alan va a explicarles a continuación en esta presentación corta de 9 minutos. Posteriormente tenemos una entrevista que yo le he realizado a Alan de muchísimo valor para que ustedes puedan disfrutarla y beneficiarse de eso. Los dejo con el primer video.
Or manager, our scarcest and most precious resource is our limited attention. So what we pay attention to can make all the difference. If you think about your organization or your business, what are the high leverage opportunities that you should be paying attention to? In fact, how do you find what these high leverage opportunities are? I'm often asked by clients, how do you go about doing that? And I think the simplest way to explain it is to look at our income statement or profit and loss statement, because that's organized in a way of a sequence of leverage. So let's put some numbers together and I'll show you exactly what I mean. So think about an organization that has a sales revenue of 100. If you have a small business, that could represent $100,000 per year. If you have a large business, this could represent $100 million a year. We will then look at what the variable cost is, and say in this case the variable cost, all the raw materials and external costs are around 50% of that, so around 50. That then gives us a gross margin of 50. And then we, of course, have to subtract the operating expenses. And there's two types of operating expenses. There's operating expenses that are direct, and there are operating expenses that are indirect. So let's just say that the indirect operating expenses versus the direct operating expenses is a ratio of 30 to 15. So 15 is essentially the wages that I have to pay in order to generate the sales of 100, and the 50 is all the others. So that gives me a combined operating expenses of 45. And I can then calculate my net profit, which in this case would be 50 minus the 45 is 5 units. So what I'd like to do is to just take these numbers and show you what would be the leverage that you could get by achieving just a 1% improvement in the various areas that are typically under control of business owners or managers. We'll start from the top and then we'll go to the bottom. So the first one that I'm going to be looking at is price. So what if we could achieve just a 1% increase in the selling price for our product or service? What will be the impact on our net profit? Now, even though these numbers are quite simple, I would encourage you to actually do the calculations and follow me as I do the calculations so you can see how it is possible to quickly quantify the impact of a 1% change of any of these variables on the outcome. So if you think about increasing the average selling price by 1%, 1% of 100 is 1, so our sales revenue will go up to 101. Our variable cost doesn't go up if we increase the selling price of the end product, so that will stay at 50, and as a result our gross margin will go to 51. The operating expenses we haven't changed, so that will remain at the 45, made up still of the 15 and 30, and that 1 comes down to increase our profits from 5 to 6. Now, if you look at that, we've gone from 5 to 6, that's a 20% improvement in profits with every 1% increase in the average selling price that we can get. That's a 1 to 20 leverage, which is enormous. Those are the type of opportunities that you should be paying attention to. Now you might ask, well, how do we increase the average selling price? The most obvious one is just to reduce the discounts that you give away. There are other ways in terms of selling direct to the consumer rather than through a distributor or a wholesaler, and then of course charging additional for emergency shipments, etc. So there are many ways to increase the average selling price. But this example is to purely show to you the high leverage you can get if that is possible. Let's look at the second leverage point, is in terms of the quantity that we sell. So again, if I want to check what would be the impact of just a 1% increase in the quantity that I sell, my sales revenue will again go up by 1. My variable cost in this case will go up because I'm selling more, which means I will consume more raw materials or other inputs that I use, and 1% of 50 would be 0.5. So as a result, my gross margin would go up from 50 to 50.5, and again my operating expenses in this case will not change. And as a result, what will happen to my net profit? this whole additional 0.5 will drop to my bottom line, so I'll have a profit of 5.5. Now, 5.5 compared to 5, that's a 10% increase in net profit. For every 1% that I can sell more, that gives me a 1 to 10 leverage. Again, enormous leverage, a high leverage point that business owners and senior managers should be focused on. Of course, there are additional ways that I can increase net profits, which relates to reduction in costs. But whereas increases in price and quantity tends to be wins for you and your suppliers, the reduction in costs is always a lose either for your suppliers and employees, and it doesn't necessarily give you that much leverage. So if you think about a reduction in operating expenses, for example, so we look at direct operating expenses, which is reducing the part of the operating expenses that is under our control, which is the direct operating expenses. In this case, a 1% reduction in direct operating expenses is not going to change our sales revenue. That will be still at 100. Our variable cost will not change, and as a result, our gross margin will not change. The only thing that will change was our operating expenses direct will reduce by 1%. And 1% of 15 would be 0.15, so this would reduce to 14.8. This will stay at 50, and therefore that goes to 44.85, and my profitability will go up by that 0.15. Now, 0.15 compared to 5 is just a 3% change, and that gives me a 1 to 3 leverage. Now, when you think about where most business owners and managers are focusing their limited attention when their profitability is under pressure, they almost immediately jump to trying to reduce costs, which normally means laying off people. Not only it has a very small leverage, you're only getting 1 to 3 impact, but it has high risk associated with it. It can result in you losing your best people or people striking, whereas the biggest leverage is sitting and applying your attention to saying, what can I do to increase the average selling price of my product or service? And then what can I do to increase the average quantity that I'm selling over a period? Those are giving me by far the biggest leverage. For example, if I can come up with a way of just increasing my average selling price by 5%, just by reducing my average discount by 5%, my leverage is 1 to 20. So a 5% increase in price will give me 100% increase in profitability. Those are enormous leverage and the type of things that business owners and managers should be focusing their attention on, rather than looking at how they can reduce the operating expenses by laying off people.
Sí, como pueden ver de ese primer video y explicación, pues eso que nos ha compartido Alan es sumamente valioso y es lo que les decía. En 5 minutos le dio más o menos este consejo a este presidente de esta editorial de libros que le ayudó a salir de esa encrucijada, estaba contra la pared y encontrar enormes soluciones. Aparte que todo eso, ese consejo, le generó miles de dólares y el poder duplicar las utilidades en 150 millones de dólares. Algo impresionante. Y esa es una idea de con lo que podemos contar en cuestión de 5 o 10 minutos de consejos. Ahora vamos a ver a continuación una entrevista de 30 minutos que yo le realizo a Alan, donde le hago un sinfín, varias preguntas, tratando de ponerme desde el punto de vista de empresarios o de altos ejecutivos de una empresa, o sea, tomando en cuenta cuáles serían los problemas esenciales que tienen las empresas y qué sugerencias da Alan para poder resolverlos. Antes que de continuar con ello, quiero mencionarles que en el chat he puesto un enlace de registro si ustedes consideran de que les interesa esta charla, de que ven que Alan puede brindarles mayores beneficios. Tendremos una conferencia virtual en vivo, en directo, con traducción simultánea al español. El 20 de septiembre va a ser impartida por Alan. Tiene una duración de 3 horas y va a incluir una sesión también de preguntas y respuestas. Justo de momento, poquito antes de que ya presentemos este segundo video, solo mencionarles y compartirles que algunas de las empresas que han trabajado y se han acercado con el doctor, con Alan Barnard, quien es científico, experto en generación de utilidades, no de ventas, sino de utilidades, que tiende a ser un talón de Aquiles en muchas empresas. Tomando eso en cuenta, Microsoft, una empresa que tiene todo el dinero del mundo, que tiene a los mejores expertos, que puede pagarle a cualquier persona y con la tecnología más avanzada del mundo, buscó a este experto, al doctor Alan Barnard, para ayudarles a resolverles problemas grandes que tenían. Y no solo fue el hecho de que lo buscaron, sino que encontraron respuesta y solución en él. O sea, eso nos da una idea de la magnitud de la persona, del expositor del que estamos hablando y la inmensa oportunidad que esto significa. Los dejamos a continuación con este video, con esta entrevista, para que ustedes puedan disfrutarlo y puedan obtener la mayor cantidad de información que les sea útil en sus labores diarios. Y ya los esperamos después de este video. Hello, good afternoon. I'm here with Dr. Alan Barnard. Alan is an authority in the field of theories of constraints. And he's an expert in decision making, which is something crucial nowadays for so many companies. Alan, it's a pleasure to have you here, and for us to have the opportunity to talk a little bit about to business owners, high executives, and I'll be asking you a few questions. The first thing, so people can get to know you, who is Alan Barnard, and why is it that you can be so helpful to so many business owners and so many companies? If you can tell us a little bit more about who you are, your background, and just develop on that.
Sure. Thank you, Javier, for the invitation. My name is Alan Barnard. I'm CEO of Goldratt Research Labs. I co-founded the research lab with Dr. Ellie Goldratt, who created Theory of Constraints back in 2009. But my journey with Theory of Constraints started way, way before that, going back to 1990 when I first read the book, The Goal, which is mostly how people get introduced to Theory of Constraints. If you haven't read the book, to any of the listeners or viewers out there, I can absolutely highly recommend it. I started off as studying engineering, but I've always been curious about why it is that some people And even some companies succeed when everybody else around them is failing. And I realized very quickly, if you think about success for a person, there's sort of four things that will determine our success. Two of them are out of our control. They are our genes. Sometimes you are just lucky to be born with good genes that allows you to be able to take much higher risks than people around you. You might be more attractive than people around you. Good genes definitely helps. The second one is good luck. If you think about those people really become successful, I'm very honored to have a number of billionaires as friends. And when you sit down and talk to them, they obviously work hard. They have an incredible work ethic, but they also can tell you how lucky they've been. So those are the two factors that are out of your control, is good genes and good luck. There are two factors in your control. The first is the most obvious, which is hard work. It doesn't matter which field you want to succeed in, you're gonna have to put in the hard work to do the work to get successful. But the last part is being able to make good decisions. And that was the thing that I thought I really want to understand. Why do so many good people make and often repeat bad decisions? So to get the academic background to this, I ended up studying engineering. I then studied psychology, macroeconomics, and ended up doing my PhD in technology and innovation. And that really gave me the foundation. I started off in manufacturing businesses, consumer goods businesses, where we applied theory of constraints. I was an executive level person in those companies. We got dramatic results. For example, the first company that I worked in was one of the largest cookware manufacturers in Africa. We ended up doubling the output of the factories without increasing operating expenses or adding capex to it, adding more equipment. We got our due date performance up from 30% to 100% all the time. We dramatically compressed our lead times. So it was my long experience in manufacturing, distribution, retail that gave me the confidence that it was possible to dramatically improve the performance of any company. So when I started working, very privileged to start working with Dr. Eli Goldratt, we started working together and increasingly more and more on big companies. And I've had the privilege to work with many Fortune 500 companies. One of the companies, for example, that most people will recognize is Microsoft. We helped them to redesign their global supply chain. Within the first year that we started with, we got their inventories down by over $250 million and sales up by a few $100 million. So that's sort of the range of experience. I started off in manufacturing myself. We're able to implement these in the companies that I was an executive in, and later on pivoted over to a consulting model. And today what we do is we essentially partner with organizations to find out what are the type of mistakes that they make in managing their businesses, all the way from the design of supply chains, the planning of work, the execution and ongoing improvement.
So talking, just hearing you talking about these different experiences that you had throughout the years with Fortune 500 companies, with Microsoft, what has been like the most common mistake that you have found in your experience that gets to be in a way, it's kind of it's repeated and repeated so many times by companies and by people, top executives?
That's a great question. I think that could be classified probably in two. The first one is when you think that you are doing the best that you can, you're not going to even try to do better. So that is always the starting point, right? Is you need not just a belief, but a solid foundation to know that not only it's possible to do better,
but that it's possible to do much better. So if there was one belief that's really, really important to have, is that belief, not just for your business, but also for yourself and your team, that it's possible not just to do better, a little bit better, but much, much better. Now, of course, people need a framework to know if it's possible. And one simple framework that you could use is, if you think about your business, your performance fluctuates over time. It will fluctuate year on year, quarter over quarter, month over month, week over week, day over day. A very simple way of checking what's really possible is if you compare your best day ever with the average day, what you'll find is that there's typically a 50% difference between those two numbers, right? So that shows you what the potential is with your current resources and current products, etc. If you could figure out what were the conditions that made it possible to have that best day and find a way of replicating those conditions on a daily basis, that's one way of checking how much better could we do. It's not 5%, it's typically 50% better, right? So that would be the most common mistake that I see, is people starting to get into this position where they're thinking, look, we've done everything that we're probably doing the best that we can. No, you're not. Just go and have a look at the difference between your best day and the average day. And by the way, that's also true for us as human beings, right? Think about your best day as a human being, your emotional state, and what you are capable of in that heightened state of emotions compared to the average day. If you think about your marriage, what was the best day ever versus the average day? Same two people, right? That shows you the magnitude of improvement that's possible. The second biggest mistake I think that we make is, if we do believe it's possible to do better or even much better, and we try to think about what should I be changing or what can I change, is that we think that we should try to improve and change everything. Everywhere where there's a gap, we should try and close that gap. And unfortunately, what that results in is local optimization. We're improving parts, but we're not improving the system. And that is where theory of constraints provides such a powerful framework. It tells us that the only part that, if we improve it, will improve the whole system, is the weakest link or the constraint. If I make the weakest link stronger, the whole chain becomes stronger. So that to me is you really have to believe it's possible to improve, not just a little bit, but a lot, else you won't even try. But if you do try, is to make sure you don't improve the parts at the expense of improving the system or just wasting resources. You have to find out where's your constraint or your weakest link and focus all your limited attention and resources on improving that part.
Do you have an example or some type of an analogy to help people understand better? What do you mean by improving these parts and versus improving the entire system?
Sure. So if you think about where can I have a constraint, right? So a very simple way of thinking about any system is, a system has a goal, right? That goal will determine what work you have to do. Do I produce products or services, right? And that goal could be an income goal, or it could be an impact goal. The goal determines the work I have to do and the resources I need to do the work, but also how much of each resource I need. Any resource that I don't have enough of to achieve the goal is a constraint. So a practical way for any business owner to think through it is to say, okay, so I have a goal. The goal is to make $1 million of income or to impact 1 million people. The first question is there enough demand for the product or service that I provide to achieve that goal? If your answer is no, guess what's the one thing to focus on? Is get enough demand, right? make sure you have some kind of irresistible offer for the product or services that demand will never become a constraint. Of course, if you say, well, I don't have a clear goal, then guess what's the one thing? Is to define the goal as clearly as possible so it's easy to understand, what work do I have to do, what resources I need, and what do I have enough of them. If you have enough demand, then the next constraint could be, I have enough demand, but I don't have enough capacity to meet that demand. So that could be an internal constraint, right? It could be in operations and procurement and finance and HR. It could be any of those functions internally that could block me from meeting the demand. If you say I have enough demand and capacity, it could be that the constraint could be supply, external to yourself. I don't have enough raw materials or components or skills, etc. And then the fourth one is, I have enough demand, enough capacity, enough supply, but I just don't have enough cash to buy enough of the supply that I need to produce enough to meet the demand. Now, those are all obvious ones, right? And they should be checked in that sequence. But there's another thing that we realize is probably the ultimate constraint for any business, which is our limited attention, specifically management attention. The number of things that demand our attention to achieve the goal, right, will always exceed our available attention. So when we treat our limited attention, especially as a business owner or executive in a company, as the constraint, we want to make sure that we focus that attention on the few things that really matter, that will help us make meaningful progress towards the goal that we have. And that's how fear of constraints and decision-making tie in. Because when we make bad decisions, we waste our scarcest resource, which is our limited attention. So I want to know, what are the few things that will benefit most from my attention, and how do I make really good decisions related to those?
So translating what you're saying, that will be the typical scenario where you have, let's say, one manager from any area that makes one mistake, and that one error then grabs the attention or needs the attention of 5 or the entire organization, or 5 more managers or supervisors from that same organization. So all of a sudden, one problem involves so many people, and instead of taking care of the problem whenever it's that small, it grows so huge then it gets out of hand. Is that correct?
It is correct. And you asked me for a practical example. So at the two extremes, I'll give you 2 extreme examples. So if you think about that Microsoft case study, right? Mm-hmm. So do you think that there is not enough demand out there for the type of products that Microsoft produces, which is, we work with their physical products division, right? Producing keyboards, mouses, smartphones, HoloLenses, etc. And the reality is no, there's enough demand. So what was their constraint was their capacity to ensure that they always have the right product at the right place at the right time. When we started with them, what we noticed was there was a gap, right? They sometimes had too much product and sometimes they had too little. So it was essentially going back into their supply chain and seeing where are the decisions that are being made that are causing avoidable shortages and surpluses, and being able to correct those decisions to reduce dramatically the shortages and surpluses that they see. And once they noticed that, that's where they got that benefit from. They got a dramatic reduction in their inventory, over $250 million in the first year. And you can imagine Microsoft is already using the best technology. They have the most, highest paid supply chain planners, etc. Very integrated supply chain, connected with everybody. But still, a bad decision could impact everybody. And at the same time, they also dramatically increase sales in 2 ways. Having less stockouts means more sales, and having less surpluses means less discounts, which means more sales revenue. So that's on the one extreme side. Is a company as large as Microsoft, you can also still simplify this. They don't have a market constraint. They don't have a supply constraint or cash constraint, but they did have a problem inside of how do I manage my operations inside in order to make sure I never have shortages or surpluses. And you can translate that to a simple example of a gym, right? You think about the gym that you can go to train, right? The equipment is all there, right? You walk into the gym, it's empty.
Right.
So they have the capacity, they have the supply, they might have enough cash, but they don't have enough demand. Right? That's their constraint. And so you sit down and you talk to the gym owner and you say, what is your goal? Right? And he says, I want to build a gym that's doing $1 million a year in revenues and $200,000 a year in net profit. You say, okay, that's a clear goal. Do you have enough customers to be able to achieve that goal? So if you sell memberships at maybe $50 a month, how many memberships do you need to sell in order to generate $1 million a year? Okay, now we have that number. Now to say, okay, what is it that you would have to offer that would get more than that amount of members to be interested in signing up for membership, to the extent that it's such a good offer that you might have a waiting list. Right? Now you can imagine even a small business like that has many problems and issues and daily challenges that will grab the business owner's attention. But what this framework does is it now tells this owner, there's one problem that if you don't solve this problem, nothing else matters. You're wasting your time trying to design a new, website or getting access keys that are electronic or an app that makes it. If you can't figure out what is the offer that you need to make to the market out there, because clearly there's a big enough market of people that want to lose weight and feel good about themselves, right? It's not the size of the market that's the problem. It's the fact that you don't have an attractive enough offer that get enough of that. That is the problem that you need to solve. How can you come up with options, create little experiments to try out the offer and see which offer is going to attract enough customers? So those are two sort of just extreme examples of how you can use the same framework.
Great. Those are great examples. One question that I have also, Alan, is what about these companies that they have this type of bottleneck within or among their top executives? Because sometimes there's so many resistance, so much problem between different areas and among the very top executives from different areas. How do you solve this type of issues, and what can you tell us about that and your experience?
Well, the first one is I think show some appreciation or respect. I do a little kind of a trick, when I do a talk, I pick up a bottle, right? A bunch of bottles. And I say, what do all these bottles have in common?
Mm-hmm.
They have a bottleneck. And the bottleneck is at the top of the bottle, right? That's true also for top management. The bottleneck is at the top of the bottle. So you are right. By far, the biggest obstacle is the fear that people have to make changes that could be harmful to the business, right? And you have to be able to overcome that fear for yourself, but also if you're a consultant or an advisor, you need to be able to help your customer or your client overcome that fear. So part of it would be to understand, why do we have the status quo bias? Why does it feel like the safest option is not to change anything? And some of it has to do with, we somehow think that if we don't change anything, we can't be blamed for it. Whereas if I change something and it's a wrong thing, I can be blamed. But if I don't change anything, nobody can blame me, and I won't blame myself. But of course, sometimes the biggest decision mistake is not making a decision at all. So what I normally offer as advice is, how do you overcome that fear for yourself, but also if you are helping a client, is to think of any change that you are making as an experiment. If you think about the objective of a change initiative is to make an improvement, right? The objective of an experiment is to see if it will work or not, right? That's much easier to rationalize. Is if I'm sitting to my team and I say, we are implementing theory of constraints, that's our new change initiative, they might get scared because they feel that if they fail, they're going to be blamed. If I say to them, listen, we want to try out slightly different rules for making decisions. There's this framework called theory of constraints that provide you with a way of making decisions in a different way for managing your operations or distribution or managing projects. We're going to do an experiment for the next month. We're going to change the way that we decide. For example, how do we make commitments? How do we allocate resources? How do we control the release of work? Or how do we prioritize work? Small experiment, and we'll use the theory of constraints rules to see if we change the way that we prioritize, if it makes a difference, if it helps us to either improve our performance, not improve our performance, or the performance goes down. I just need to know, those are the three outcomes. Is it helpful, harmful, or not helpful? And I think that is a very practical way of overcoming our own fear and those of others, is to start thinking about every change as an experiment to learn from.
Great. Alan, we're getting to the end of this interview with you. If you could tell, what would be a message that you could tell some business owners or high executives that might be on the fence? They're probably indecisive about doing or taking the next step and moving on to assist in this conference. What will you tell them? Why is it important? How beneficial? What impact it might have in their businesses?
Well, I think the first thing for them to start is to kind of re-look at their business performance and sit down and say, what is the true gap between their actual level of performance and probably what they intuitively know is possible? And if they don't have good intuition, like I said, use this very simple kind of framework of say, let's compare my best day ever with my average day. What would my year look like if I got close to my best day every day? And what you'll find is, doesn't matter who it is, at least a 50% improvement is possible. So that to me would be a good starting point, is to get re-excited about what the true potential is. How big is that improvement gap? And how will that change your life and the life of everybody that's involved in your business, including not just your employees, but upstream, your suppliers. If you can grow by 10x, you will help them grow by 10x, right? And downstream, your customers. So to get re-excited about the true potential that's in your business, that is a necessary first step. But the second step is to say, okay, if there is a big gap, now I need to consider the fact that I do have an attention bottleneck, right? I can't give attention to everything. I need a way of figuring out what are the one or few things that if I just change that can dramatically close that gap between the actual and the theoretical best. And that's really what our webinar is going to be, is I'm going to provide them with a step-by-step way of finding out what that one thing or few things are in their business that can help to dramatically close that gap.
Just fantastic. I think people are going to be so enthusiastic about all these recipes that you're going to be giving in the conference. It's a virtual conference that we're having with Dr. Alan Bernard. So, well, I think everything is right there. I mean, it's so easy for people just to take the next step and move on and get a few of your knowledge, pick on your knowledge, and get a few of your advices on these areas. Alan, thank you so much. I don't know if you have one last comment.
Yeah, I think the last thought is just, if you are thinking about attending, and I recommend that you should, is consider to bring your team with you. Maybe a business partner or your direct reports, because often you go and attend a webinar like this and you get these great ideas and breakthroughs and aha moments. And then you go back and you try to explain it to others and you struggle, right? So to have everybody right there and are going through the same emotions, same aha moments, and you can go back, to your business and together as a team, see how you can apply what you've learned. I think, I would highly recommend bring your team with you, bring your business partners with you so you can go through it together.
One final question that just came up to my mind. What about those people that, do you have like a testimonial? I mean, do you have a company that probably went to you and probably said to you, Alan, we were kind of hesitating about attending a conference with you, and then after assisting or attending your conference, our results went up this much? Do you have some type of example that you can tell us a little briefly about?
It's very interesting. I was just reviewing some case studies from the past, and one of them was a company in South Africa. They were in an industry supplying explosives to the mines, and they were being absolutely wiped out by low-cost imports. And they were actually thinking about, starting to scale down their business. They thought that the best thing that they can do for their customers is they might be as well buying from the cheap imports and just be a distributor, right? Rather than making it themselves, manufacturing themselves. And I met their team and convinced them that it's possible for them to develop a competitive advantage. The founder, the CEO of the company, we worked very closely together. And the end outcome of that company, they had the best few years in their history after that mindset change. But it started off by almost how we started talking it is so critical for the business owner and the executive team to really believe that it's possible to dramatically improve, to dramatically add value to your customers that, will give you a competitive advantage. And then to say, okay, how do I build such the capabilities? How do I capitalize on it, etc.? So there's quite a few examples I have from my past that I can share as testimonials. Some from very large companies like the CTO of Microsoft sharing the incredible results they've got, to some results that was achieved by small business owners.
Excellent. So, well, people is there. As you can see, Alan has the knowledge, the experience, all the background. So we hope to see you attending the conference. Thanks, Alan. Alan, thanks so much for this brief introduction to what's going to be in the conference. Thanks a lot.
You're very welcome.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Y como pueden ver de ambos videos, aquí lo rescatable que yo quisiera hacer mención para que ustedes puedan llevarse eso y valorar, es una de las cosas que menciona Alan. Una de ellas es de que se puede mejorar, no únicamente un poquito, pero se puede mejorar muchísimo más. Eso es algo increíble y a tomarlo en cuenta, porque muchas veces nos empantanamos o caemos en una creencia pensando que si acaso podemos hacer una mejora, es una mejora mínima, y no es así. Alan nos ha comentado diferentes casos, incluyendo el de Microsoft y otras empresas, aparte de lo que, pues, las experiencias que así lo demuestran, que es posible mejorar un 50% y mucho más en la generación de mayores utilidades, de economizar gastos, etc. Y otro punto relevante a tomar en cuenta es la parte de la toma de decisiones. Aquí yo quiero hacer y acotar algo que es valioso. Hace ya varios años, más de quizás 10, 15 años, el ejecutivo mejor pagado en Estados Unidos era el presidente de Disney, Michael Eisner, y en ese tiempo él ganaba $52 millones al año. Y era el ejecutivo mejor pagado porque él resolvía problemas. Le pagaban para eso, le pagaban para poder solucionar problemas para Disney. Y obviamente uno puede decir, pero ¿cómo es posible que le paguen tanto dinero? Pero sí, le pagaban tanto dinero porque generaba muchísimo más. A esta empresa le generaba miles de millones de dólares en la solución de problemas que él planteaba, en la dirección, con la dirección de todo su equipo, etcétera, etcétera. Entonces eso es algo muy rescatable y es parte de lo que también menciona Alan, y dice que parte del problema puede estar usualmente el cuello de botella. Los cuellos de botellas en las organizaciones se generan arriba, y tenemos que decirlo con toda la franqueza del mundo, se generan al nivel directivo, a nivel de los propietarios, de los altos ejecutivos, y el enfoque en la toma en la atención de la gente, en la toma de decisiones, el enfoque gerencial es vital. Si tenemos un enfoque que está desviado, nos va a jalar, nos va a ocupar de nuestro tiempo, y que es el tiempo más valioso, es un tiempo preciado, y no vamos a estar rindiendo, nuestra empresa no va a estar rindiendo a la capacidad deseada. Otro punto importante a reenfatizar es el hecho de que Alan nos ha mencionado que el mejorar una pequeña parte, un eslabón dentro de esa estructura, dentro de esa cadena de sistemas de trabajo, de procesos en nuestra empresa, con mejorar una parte, probablemente no estamos, o mejor dicho, no mejoramos todo el sistema, pero si mejoramos una parte que significa la mayor debilidad en esa cadena, en ese eslabón, en todo ese proceso integral de nuestra organización, vamos a estar realizando cambios sustanciales y realizando mejoras cuantiosas que significan y se transforman en generación de muchas utilidades. Y por último, él habló de la parte del miedo. El miedo de muchos empresarios, de muchos altos ejecutivos a tomar una decisión, a hacer un pequeño cambio. Y lo importante de dar ese salto, de sortear ese pequeño miedo, va a marcar una diferencia enorme entre crecer mínimamente, si es que estamos creciendo, si es que la empresa está creciendo, o crecer sustancialmente, de forma geométrica. Y a eso es a lo que nosotros queremos invitarlos a que apuesten. Muchas veces el miedo nos ancla a que tomemos decisiones, y la misma decisión de postergar, de omitir tomar una decisión, muchas veces tiende a ser más grave que tomar o que cometer algún error. Y aquí, por eso mismo, nosotros queremos invitarlos a esta conferencia virtual en directo, con traducción simultánea. Requiere de una inversión. Les estoy dejando el enlace en el chat donde viene toda la información, y es una oportunidad de contar con esa sapiencia, con la experticia, con los consejos del doctor Barnard. Un consejo, como ya les expuse al inicio, puede cambiarlo todo drásticamente, puede acortarles tiempos, dolores de cabeza, y eso para una empresa es la diferencia entre quedarse estancado, entre empezar a realizar despidos o dar un salto cuántico, dar un salto bastante sustancial que va a crear un crecimiento y con ello va a generar mayores empleos en sus respectivas organizaciones. Y de eso es lo que se trata. Por último, yo los dejo con ese enlace, y tenemos algo especial para ustedes, para todas las empresas del estado de Michoacán que nos están escuchando hoy en día. Si realizan el registro a más tardar pues en estos próximos días, y a más tardar el 12 de septiembre, tenemos un descuento especial en un paquete que usualmente está la inversión individual es de 5,000 pesos masiva, pero el paquete con derecho a tener la grabación de la conferencia, eso cuesta 20,000 pesos masiva. Pero aquí el descuento, lo que tenemos para ustedes es un 50%. O sea que pagando 10,000 pesos, ustedes pueden contar con 2 participantes en directo, pero a la vez pueden obtener la grabación de la conferencia, igual de las preguntas y respuestas, y compartirlo con toda la organización. O sea que es una ventaja maravillosa. Pueden sentarse, pueden discutirlo, pueden utilizarlo como un toque de timón y enrumbarse en diferentes vías y caminos. Habiéndoles dicho eso, yo concluyo nuevamente. Acá está el enlace. Nuestra dirección es, si quieren información, es FitoCorp, con FITOCORP, P de Pablo, de corporación, International, con T, FitoCorp International, o javier@fitocorpinternational.com. Nos pueden contactar ahí y con todo gusto les respondemos, o pueden directamente igualmente contactarnos a este enlace que les he dejado en el chat. Y si no, por último, si están interesados, pueden igualmente poner sus datos en el chat, y pues yo tomaría notas para poder contactarlos y proceder pues a una siguiente etapa en la conferencia con Alan Barnard. Muchísimas gracias a todos por el tiempo, y los dejo con Rodrigo o con alguien de la Secretaría de Desarrollo. No sé si tienen algún comentario, pues si no, sería el fin de esta transmisión, y nuevamente pues agradecerles.
Javier, ¿me escuchas?
Sí, completamente.
Javier, muchísimas gracias por esta introducción a lo que va a ser la conferencia del doctor Alan Barnard. Con una pregunta más, ¿nos puedes repetir nada más el día que va a ser la conferencia?
Sí, claro que sí, Morelia. Es el 20 de septiembre, es un miércoles 20 de septiembre a las 4 de la tarde. Y es una transmisión que es en vivo, es en directo. Tenemos con traducción simultánea al español, y tenemos la ventaja pues de contar con el doctor Barnard, que es algo, pues por sus tiempos, es algo difícil de lograr.
Perfecto, muchísimas gracias, Javier. Quiero finalizar esta ponencia además de agradecer el tiempo de ustedes y esta importante introducción que nos dieron de estas limitaciones que luego tenemos las empresas, que entregándote el reconocimiento que te pido por favor le hagas llegar al doctor Barnard, es a nombre del gobierno del estado de Michoacán, a través de la Secretaría de Desarrollo Económico, le entregan este reconocimiento al doctor Alan Barnard por su valiosa intervención como ponente en la Academia de Michoacán, en Academich, bajo la ponencia Los 3 mayores errores que limitan la rentabilidad de tu empresa y cómo evitarlos. Esta ponencia está siendo transmitida a través de la Secretaría de Desarrollo Económico aquí en sus instalaciones en Avenida Lázaro Cárdenas en Morelia, Michoacán, el día 6 de septiembre del 2023, les repito, aquí en Morelia, Michoacán. Javier, este documento que tengo aquí, creo que no sé si te lo vayan a proyectar por ahí, pero este documento que tengo aquí ya está firmado por mi secretario de Desarrollo Económico, el licenciado Claudio Méndez, con todo el agradecimiento por la participación tuya y del doctor Alan. Muchísimas gracias y esperamos verlos muy pronto por aquí.
Muchísimas gracias, es un placer haber compartido con ustedes y haber tenido esta oportunidad. Muchas gracias y claro que sí estamos a la orden y gracias a todos los asistentes.
Cualquier nota nosotros te la haremos llegar, Javier.
Muchas gracias, muy amables.
Gracias a ustedes, hasta pronto.
Hasta luego a todos, bye.
Michoacán, honestidad y trabajo.